Teresa's taken 3 of her own books, and you just heard, if you were on the call, our conversation tonight, that she's taken her newest book to a bestseller already. So Teresa's taken 3 of her own books to #1 in international bestseller status in only 8 months. The Evolutionary Business Council, which she's involved with, reaches over 40 million people worldwide, which is pretty impressive stuff. There she is, a nice little picture of Teresa with her book, Mass Influence, what we're going to talk about tonight. So welcome to the Online Chat Cafe. This is a webinar series I do to just, spur us on, just have a place where you can hang, get away from the news of the day and just reconnect and learn and be inspired. And that's the whole goal of this. And it also just backs up my coaching practice, the Boomer Business Coach. And that's what I do. I own a company called the Boomer Business Coach, and working with new entrepreneurs to help them get going. So Teresa, the book, Mass Influence. Why write about mass influence? What is it about this topic that fascinates
you? Well, importance became an important conversation to me when I was about 3. And this happens for a lot of people who are the youngest of really big families. I'm actually the youngest of a very large Northern Canadian family. I'm the youngest of 9 kids. But influence became a fascination for me from a fairly early age, and it's something that I've dedicated a lot of my life to studying. And what I was really seeing, one of the things that you need to know about influence actually is that, most of us learned a rule book in kindergarten and a set of etiquette or skill set that we learned when we first started networking in business that work against us becoming influential. And in fact, most good people have, an inner conversation, self-limiting beliefs, mind viruses, whatever you want to call them, depending on what leadership books you read. They're all talking about the negative self-talk that we do, but everybody has a different name for it. But most people are hardwired with a negative inner conversation that stops them becoming successful and, more importantly, influential. And, underline that with the only people that don't have a lot of inner conversation that stops them from becoming influential tend to be sociopaths, right? So what's at risk? If good people don't learn this skill and don't learn to step over their own inner dialogue and come to peace with their inner dialogue, then what we really risk is that we end up living in a world run by sociopaths. Like, yikes, not the world I want my kids to grow up in. So one of the reasons I wrote Mass Influence was that I really wanted to help people understand when good people do become influential, what does it take? What are those habits? What's the etiquette? What's the unspoken rule book? So that everyday heroes, people running grassroots initiatives or leading small business or business leaders in corporations could all find powerful ways to become influential and create more success in the world.
All right. So that's what fascinates you then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to welcome Elijah to the call, and also Sohini. So welcome to you both for joining us and joining us tonight. So why do you feel it's important then for the reader to tap into some of the ideas and concepts that you discuss in the book, especially as small business owners? Because that's predominantly
actually, David, I just want to mention too that I can't see the chat board other than what you're typing, so I can't see other people's questions.
Okay.
And I love it when we keep it informal and people put like real examples and real things that you're challenged with in business in front of me, because then I can really tailor make it to you guys. So if you don't mind, if you could just have everybody type in the chat field if there's anything, what do you focus on in business? Like maybe what problem do you solve?
I'll do that for sure.
Yeah, and if there's anything specific that you want me to touch on, like what are you challenged with when you think about connecting with highly influential people or learning to become influential, and then that way I can work what you're doing into the comments.
Right.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to step over your question, but I just wanted to invite people to do that.
Oh yeah, no, they're welcome to chime in and write questions and be a part of this. And we'll have
Yeah,
time for
I'd
Q&A.
really like to be of service
Yeah,
to you guys and really tailor make this to what you need.
right.
So really, it's important for, as I said, for regular good people to tap into the ideas and concepts because, a lot of people think of influence as something people either have or don't have. You have brown eyes, you have blonde hair, you have influence. And influence is not that. Influence is a skill of leadership like any other skill. And in another paradigm a lot of people have around influence is that somehow it's something that's time consuming. I've got to learn this skill and then it's going to take up a bunch of time from every day. And the reality is, just to use an analogy, breathing takes 24 hours out of your day. And none of you would actually look at breathing and say, oh my God, I don't have enough time to do that. Once you mastered it, it was just something that you naturally and routinely did during the course of your day. Influence is a lot like that. It takes a little bit to learn how to exercise that muscle so that you start naturally growing your own influence. But once you get it, it is so natural and so intuitive that it simply becomes a matter of course to your daily business. So one of the reasons I wrote Mass Influence was that I just wanted people to understand what are those routine habits that you need to build into the way you think, the way you operate your day, so that influence becomes as natural as breathing to you.
Right. And we'll discuss those as we move on. But, mastering the art of influence, is it for everyone? I mean, what if you're just not hungry enough or motivated enough? I mean, what then? I mean, what can someone who's just coasting along and working business, what will they gain then from reading the book? Let's say, they've never even thought of the idea that they could be an influencer or really tap into a tribe, and make that big an impact. What if they're just happy, doing their own thing, right?
Well, all of you already have a certain level of influence, right? And all of you already have the skill of influencing people in a one-on-one context. And mass influence is just taking that to any conversation that is a group conversation. As soon as you start stepping into a one-to-many conversation instead of a one-on-one conversation, then that's really where you start to step up your game to more of a mass influence level. And you're right, not everybody feels called to that. Some people just know in every cell of their being that there was someone who were put here to work with people one-on-one. But I just want to put to you a different context to think about, right? Even if you are someone who's a one-on-one coach or consultant, you need to give the people you would serve the ability to get out of their own way and listen to you so that you can help them. And the more people perceive you to be in a one-to-many conversation, the easier it is to believe, A, not only that you're worth a lot of money, but B, that you're someone they should really, really listen to. When people see me walk out on stage in front of 1,000 people, they've got no trouble whatsoever believing that I'm $1,000 an hour as a coach, and if I deem to coach them, they will listen to what I say because they know that value. So sometimes having influence is one of the best things you could do for those you would help because it helps them get past their own negative inner dialogue about letting you teach them and serve them.
Before I go to this questions on this next slide here, you mentioned something that the perception is that you've got is this, that you're $1,000 a day coach or $1,000 for or plus for a keynote. How do we get to understand our worth and our value? And I guess, so how do we do that? And then the other question that I kind of have around that is, how do we know to charge that much? How do we know we're ready, we're baked?
Yeah. Well, it's a paradigm shift, David. You don't determine your value, you create your value, right? And one of the ways you create your value is to get out of the paradigm of billing yourself out by the hour. Oprah Winfrey, her time is probably worth something like $700,000 an hour. I just made that number up off the top of my head, because she works in a one-to-many scenario, right? And anytime you think about, a really good exercise to do, actually, if you want to think about what's the value of a relationship with one influential person, think about if one influential person in your field endorsed you. Just pick a name. Maybe it's a reporter who does health reporting, or someone who writes for an influential magazine, or someone who leads a big industry conference. One endorsement from an influential person, what might that mean to your business on an annual basis in additional revenue? And if you're someone who bills yourself out by the hour, then you're probably doing math right now. You're probably saying, well, right now I have 30 of my 40 hours in the week filled, and if I got a really influential endorsement, that would bill me up to the 40-hour level, and I bill out at $130 an hour, so let me do the math, and that's worth something like $20,000 a year. I just made all that up because I can't do math in my head, right? But you probably came up with a number like that. Whereas if you're someone that deals with people many at a time, maybe you do group sessions, or maybe you host workshops, or maybe you have a radio show, or you're an author, or you write an influential blog. All of a sudden, there's no limit to what an influential endorsement might do for you. An influential person sending traffic your way or sending you potential clients, now you don't have a cap on that. And when you think about that, I'm sort of presenting it in a monetary way, which I get is not necessarily the main driver for a lot of your audience, David, because I know you attract some really awesome, wonderful people who are really of high service to the world. But the money is a good measure for how much service you're providing. Are you really helping people? If you are, more money starts to flow in, right? So it's interesting to think about it in that way. The more people you serve, the more people believe an hour of your time is worth. Isn't that an interesting irony in life? A speaker who incidentally coaches makes a lot more money than a coach who incidentally speaks. And the only difference between those two individuals may simply be how they present themselves or introduce themselves.
Can we overprice ourselves?
Well, the market will tell you that. Right? If you overprice yourself, people won't pay.
Right. So we still have to, listen to what our market wants, what our customers have as far as budget goes.
The customers will tell you if there's enough value for what you're charging. Right? But value is in their perception. And when you learn the influence game, their perception of your value goes up markedly. When I tell you I have a personal reach in the millions, you suddenly have a different perception of my value as a human being, simply by knowing that that many people listen to me.
Right. You mentioned it's also a skill, and I want to talk about the skill aspect, and let's get to the game in just a moment. How is influence a skill? What do we need to learn in order to acquire that skill, Teresa?
Well, if you look at influence, it's really, I've broken it down in Mass Influence to a set of 10 habits that if you acquire these 10 habits, and with each habit, there's mistakes that you want to avoid that sort of lead to, here's the etiquette of the way that influential people work. But once you acquire that, then it really starts to become very easy once you understand sort of the whole framework for how influence works, right? The book is an easy read. It's, you can read it in a couple of days, and then it's just a matter of implementing what you're doing, I really wanted people to get this, so one of the reasons we set the book up the way we did, we set up a 30-day influence challenge with the book. When you buy the book, you get the challenge, or and the book is, we've requested that Amazon make it free on Kindle, and we still haven't heard back, so it's still listing for 99 cents on Kindle, but if 99 cents is too much for you to pay to get this book and this 30-day program, wait a couple days, it should be free. But the idea is that, I didn't want there to be anything in anyone's way from learning this skill set, because my personal goal is that transformational principles hit 1.2 billion people on this planet by the year 2020. Well, that means that good people who are out to cause success principles and success to happen on this planet, whether or not you're selling a product that helps people live healthy, whether or not you're teaching leadership in a big corporation, whether or not you run a small business that coaches people, all of those are concepts of thought leadership. You know, basically you're pushing out new ideas and new ways of thinking. And I wanted this skill set to be available to you. So if you want, we can break it down into some of the individual habits, although I know you have sort of a series of specific questions that you wanted to ask, David. How do you want to tackle this?
Well, we're going to get to that, because in my
Okay.
questions, you know, we talk about the habits, right? You know,
Yeah.
one of the things you share in the book, you share a story about handling a situation of offering to buy coffee for a guest speaker at a networking. Do you recall this?
Yeah.
And that
You know,
that's
let me,
and then that's a no-no. Whereas having coffee with Joe, one of your colleagues, the guy you just met at the networking event, is okay. Why? What are some mistakes we might be making?
yeah, that's a great example of underlining how the skill set is different for the highly influential, right? Because you all learned when you first started networking that offering to buy a colleague a lunch or coffee is a really good thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of lives in the realm of influence marketing or networking. And you know, you only have to try and phone up the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and offer to buy them coffee, and faster than you can say restraining order, you'll find that there's a different rule book that applies to the highly influential, right? Which would point to one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when they're trying to build influential connections, right? And that would be what I would affectionately call the premature ask. I always chuckle because people always laugh when I say that. Yes, I said ask, the premature ask. And, you know, the premature ask is like that equivalent of when you've just moved into a new house and the neighbor comes by and the first thing they say to you is, oh my gosh, I love that lawnmower. I can't wait to borrow that baby, right? And at that point, you're probably rolling your eyes up into your head going, shoot me now, who did I just move in next door to? And the equivalent of that in business is, you know, at networking functions, you often see, you know, the most influential person in the room would be the speaker or the guest of honor. They'll walk off stage, and there may be a lineup of people there waiting to meet them, and they'll have their book or their CD in hand, or they'll be wanting to buy them lunch or a coffee, or maybe give them a product sample. And, you know, offering to buy coffee for someone who's highly influential, or offering them a sample of your product, is a lot like going to the new neighbor you just met and saying, you're going to so love my kids. You're going to really enjoy babysitting them. You know, it's an example of, it doesn't matter how you frame it. It's more about you and what you want than it is about the influential person. So it's premature. It's too early in the relationship for you to be doing that. If you want to build a relationship with an influential person, what you want to be doing is giving them influence, right? That's the equivalent of the apple pie that you would take to the new neighbor. And one of the reasons we created the 30-day influence challenge was because it's basically helping you wrap your head around, how do I give influence to influential people? A lot of people have trouble making that mental shift of how you would do that. But essentially, you're going to start doing things like, you meet an influential person, you might say, can I interview you in my online chat cafe? I'm just shouting you out, David, because I think this is awesome what you do, right? Or you might say, can I recommend you on LinkedIn? I heard you said you were going to be speaking in Ottawa next week. Maybe I could post your event on my LinkedIn for you because I have colleagues in Ottawa on LinkedIn. Or you might connect them with someone else influential who has another stage that might book them as a speaker. There are literally dozens of examples of how you could endorse or shine the light on that influential person. And when you get in the routine habit of giving recognition and influence to people who deserve it, it's got to be authentic, it's going to start flowing back to you, and you won't even know it hit you. You'll become so influential.
Okay, so it's like giver's game, really, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, you know, this notion of being an influencer can be a bit dangerous. I mean, you know, look at, and I know you write about these people in your book, Nelson Mandela. I mean, he spent years in prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what inside us would still want to make a difference and risk jail, or in some cases, like the late Martin Luther King, who you also write about or mention, in a few places, face assassination attempts. I mean, what drives those who are influencers to, to, to do so in the face of some really severe consequences? I remember
Yeah.
taking, Landmark, the forum, and they said, they shoot leaders. Why,
Yeah.
why do we
It's
want
very true.
this? What drives people?
Well, and here's the thing, if you're going to do something that really matters on this planet, if nobody's upset by what you're saying, you're probably not saying anything worthwhile at all, is the truth.
So you gotta piss some
The
people
bigger
off.
the stand you take,
Yeah.
you can almost tell someone's influence by the fact that they will have people who love them and people who hate them. And so as you step into the really big games, that can go to the extreme. The people, you might give your life to the people who hate you because you're so challenging their status quo, and people who are stuck in a negative way of thinking will fight tooth and nail to keep that negative way of thinking. Like, just ask Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about improving someone's health or being a stand that we have a better form of leadership in an organization. There's going to be people who want to stay in their comfort zone and keep doing what they're doing that are going to start to take shots at you as a leader. That's part of influence. So, but here's the thing, right? If you talk to Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr., they would have told you they were amongst the happiest people on the planet, right? Because they were living their dreams and being of high contribution. And I think if you asked either of them, would they have ever done it any other way, I don't think either of them would have said that they would have lived any life but the one that they live. Now, I'm not asking you to go out and put yourself in harm's way, right? Those are very extreme examples of what influence causes. There's lots of great examples of influence going on our planet. Dr. John Demartini, Janet Atwood, people who've written great New York Times best-selling books, and certainly their lives are not at risk, and they touch millions of people on this planet. A great example going on in business right now is the work that Judy von Niekirk is doing with the digital bra. I don't know if you've heard about Judy's work, but Judy's the survivor of a horrific incest story, one of the worst you'll ever hear. Her father literally kept her prisoner as a child. And she did so much work to overcome her own inner demons and, all the baggage that you can naturally imagine would come with that kind of a history. But Judy actually became a leader in the women's empowerment movement in Britain and Europe. And she's just a beautiful human being. If you haven't met her, go do one of her workshops or look to meet the lady. But one of the things that drives Judy crazy about our generation of women is that we think it's okay to hurt ourselves in the name of beauty and fashion, right? We wear shoes that hurt. Don't even talk to me about bikini waxing. And, in the health conversation, cancer researchers and chiropractors cite poorly fitting and underwire bras as a major health risk, right? So Judy invented a little app that you can download on your iPhone or your smartphone. It's called the Digital Bra. And the app allows women to scan their bodies and order a custom-fitting bra. And she's actually just launching it on Kickstarter, and you'll see there's a lot of conversation going on around this launch, a lot of people jumping in to support her developing this product. Because Judy's not just standing in, I'm selling clothing. Judy is a stand that our generation of women teach our daughters that sexy and beautiful shouldn't have to hurt. Now, isn't that a fun thing to stand in? Now, nobody is going to ask Judy to be a martyr over this business initiative, and yet she's spreading empowerment and a better way of thinking on this planet just as effectively as Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr. did, because she's changing the way a generation of women think. Isn't that cool? And there's lots of examples of that in business, especially with entrepreneurs, when you can find very specific practical initiatives that people can wrap their head around and have those solve what people would perceive as a very big problem in their lives. then you can disrupt the thinking of an entire group of people and become a very influential leader to boot.
So is that part of the makeup of an influencer, that maybe they've gone through, horrific challenges in their life, and they're coming up with new disruptive, and that's a big buzzword these days, is disruptive technology, and
Yeah. Well,
change
show me a
agents
human
and
being.
game changers. Is that all
Yeah.
part of the makeup of the characteristics of an influencer in this day and age,
Well,
Teresa?
I would say that's part of the conversation, right? Show me a human being and I'll show you someone who's lived through horrific challenges. It's part of the human condition that we all have challenges in our life, right?
Hmm.
And if you want to be influential, solve a big problem for the world, right? And don't do it in a general, generic way. Do it in a specific way that people can wrap their head around, right? Like, think about, what does it take for a 28-year-old fresh out of Bible college to become globally iconic? I'm talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of course, right? And he stood in the biggest problem going on the planet at the time, racial inequality. But he gave people very specific initiatives that they could wrap their heads around. They did the bus boycott at Montgomery, Alabama. They did the march at Selma. These were very distinct problems that they were targeting, so it was easy for people to jump on board. You as entrepreneurs have that same opportunity in front of you. Identify a big problem, solve it in a specific way. And, for example, ill health is not a big problem. That's not something people can wrap their head around. You sound like you say you're a snake oil salesman if you just say, I'm a health practitioner. If you say, I'm someone who's an expert in fibromyalgia, or I focus on healing fibromyalgia, and I do it through acupuncture, I'm making this up, that's a lot more specific. People can wrap their head around it. It's actually easier to be more influential in that more specific conversation.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Liking what I'm hearing. A couple more questions I've got for you, and then we'll open up the questions from the group. Okay. Um, the inner dialogue, mastering the art of influence. We already talked a little bit about this. It's not for everyone. Would you agree?
Well, you would think that. You would think that it's not for everyone. And in some respects, I would agree that, some people are just hardwired to work in a one-on-one capacity. And yet, I would think that understanding this paradigm of how the highly influential operate and how to deal with the highly influential when your life demands it is a skill set that I would like to see everyone on this planet have, because it's very simple and very easy, and influence is the force for change on our planet. Whether you're wanting to change the way people think about their health, whether you're wanting to change a specific approach in business, or whether you're just wanting to get the toxic meatloaf removed from your local cafeteria, you need influence. So although I would say some people are hardwired to play this game at a much bigger level, I do think everyone does need some level of understanding the concepts of how influence works.
Right. And I remember seeing this young girl, I think she was maybe 14, 15, and she went head to head against Kevin O'Leary from the Dragon's Den, now of Shark Tank, on an environmental, business issue. And, here's a young woman at 14, 15 who was very articulate and really made a really good, business case for her point of view. Kevin O'Leary, I find a bit of a bully in his tactics and his comeback, kind of bullied her and got his point across, a counterpoint. But good for her. So this is something then that everybody can master and harness and adopt it for their own, either their business or their life or whatever it is that what we're up to in life. Correct? Would you agree with that then?
Absolutely.
All right.
It's far more intuitive and easy than you might think. It's a lot like riding a bike, right? When you were a kid, you thought your parents were crazy for thinking you could balance on that thing.
Yeah.
And then once you got the skill of riding a bike, you, within a year or two of that point, couldn't remember when you ever thought it was difficult. And influence is a lot like that. It's like there's a paradigm shift that happens, and once you get it, it's just like, wow, I can't believe I ever didn't get this, because it is that simple and it is that intuitive. That's one of the reasons I created the 30-day influence challenge, which is the complimentary program that comes when you download the book, because it's basically just helping you exercise your muscle. It's like going out with the training wheels on. Do this for 30 days. You don't need the training wheels anymore. You just get it. And influence just becomes something that you naturally start to build.
All right. And do we have to sort of master our inner dialogue in order to say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do that?
Absolutely. One of the biggest habits of influential people is, in fact, authenticity, or, how genuine are you? And there's a lot of different definitions of authenticity out there. I've got a whole chapter in the book dedicated to this because, here's my definition. Authenticity is your inside voice saying the same thing as your outside voice.
All right. I love it.
And, so a good test of that is, are you really doing something that you're deeply passionate about? Because if you're not, you've got an inner dialogue that's different than what's coming out of your mouth. Your inner conversation might be saying, oh God, I need this sale, and your outer conversation is, this is a really great product, you should buy it. And we all know, we can recognize people who have that disconnect going on, right? You would call them schmarmy. But the reality is, a lot of us have an inner dialogue that stops us from doing what we're deeply passionate about, right? Because your dreams are bigger to you than to anyone else on the planet, because they're your dreams. Holy cow. And you are the person who is best hardwired, more than anyone else on this planet, to live your dreams, because you will be the most excited and passionate about them, because they're your dreams. So isn't that an interesting catch-22, right? Because your inner dialogue is going to really be confronted when you start stepping into the game you really want to play, because all of those things you told yourself when you were first learning language and started having those early failures of your life, you might have told yourself, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good at speaking in front of a crowd, I don't have enough schooling. Mine was, I'm too small to play with the big kids because I'm the youngest of 9, right? Everybody has some version of this, and it gets really confronted when you start stepping into your dreams. But here's the thing, that's the realm in which high influence lives. And notice, if you want to know what your dreams are, notice what you say. No, in fact, have a little alarm bell go off in the back of your head. If you hear yourself say something like, someday when I will. Someday when I have enough money, I'll quit my job and I'll do X, Y, Z. Someday when I have enough education, I'll do blah, blah, blah. Someday when I'm smart enough, when I'm rich enough, when I'm wealthy enough, that's a good clue to what your dreams, what you'd rather be doing. Another good clue is if you consistently hear yourself say, why doesn't somebody just? Why doesn't somebody just blah, blah, blah? Why isn't somebody just blah, blah, blah? If you have an annoying, persistent complaint, that's the problem you have been dubbed the solution to, because it annoys you more than anyone else. You should be fixing it. That's where you would hold the most influence.
Yeah, I love it. Are we okay to take some questions?
Absolutely. I can't see them. So
okay, I'll read them to you.
Okay.
Elijah says, as a successful author, what practical advice would you give to a new author to create influence, and how do you translate your concepts into practical steps to do that?
Are you a self-help author, fiction author? Tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Elijah, can you write that down? If not, I can unmute you too. So.
Okay. While you type that, David, I'll let you tell me in a minute. Let me just say, one of the best things you can do is put your book on the bestseller list. I mean, that's one of the reasons I teach a course on how to become a best-selling author, because it's a great context in which to learn how to become influential, right? Your work, you wrote it, I know, or you wouldn't be in David's group, because I know what kind of people David would attract. You wrote your work to be of service to the world. There was some gift you wanted to give others, right? So for you to really serve the world, you need a lot of people to hear about your work.
So Elijah, I just unmuted you. There's a lot of background noise coming from you, I think. Do you want to share what you're about?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me first of
Yes,
all?
yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
can. Elijah, tell me a little bit more about you and your work.
Okay, I published a nonpartisan political manual. It's the title of it, The God of Politics. Um, it's a guide to government, governing, and politics from a biblical perspective.
Nice.
And and I also do a blog as well. A new blog as well, along the same subject.
Okay. So Elijah, let me explain to you what a best-selling book is. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
So a best-selling book is nothing more than 200 influential people all talking about your book all at the same time. Okay? Because
Hmm.
all of the bestseller lists have a timing component to them, right? So whether you're talking about being a bestseller on Amazon or USA Today or Wall Street Journal, they're all, and whoever sells the most books in the period of time that that list records, right? And
Right.
so what you need to do is create a word of mouth epidemic around your book. So if I boil that down to its most basic elements, what you need are influential relationships with a lot of people that if they would recommend and endorse your book would make a significant difference to a lot of people reading that book, right? I,
Okay, that
I,
makes sense.
I very humbly know why my book hit #1 international best-selling status in 4 countries on launch day. And I realize it's because I have a relationship with hundreds of other influential people that I've helped over the years. And these people are generously giving back to me right now in actually what's a pretty overwhelming and humbling way, actually. Because they won't
Mm.
shut up about my book. Some of them are actually reposting my blog posts daily to send people to this book, right?
Wow.
So the goal for you is how do you build 200, and I'm using 200 as an arbitrary number, right? I'm just giving you like ballpark figures so that you can
Okay.
get started, right?
Okay.
But how do you start building relationships with all those influential people that you want to talk about your book, right?
Right.
Can you think of 3 people off the top of your head, Elijah, that if they were to endorse your book, that would probably have a lot of people read it?
Yes. Yes, actually.
So tell me some names, like who would be good?
I know a bishop who is on the national board of the NAACP.
Okay,
Um, he would,
okay,
and I know another person, like a former pastor when I was in New York. He covers like a few hundred churches, around the world.
nice.
Um, and and then I know a a politician, well, a couple of politicians, a couple of elected officials. One, the New York State Comptroller, uh, uh, he would endorse my book, I'm sure.
Okay, so I'm going to give you some homework. Can I give you an exercise?
Yes,
Yep.
please.
This is similar to what the 30-day influence challenge would be telling you to do. So David,
Okay.
for the next 2 weeks, every day, I want you to figure out how to publicly shine a light on the work of one of those 4 individuals.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, let's say the New York pastor has an article that they've written in a famous journal. You're going to share that article with your following and make sure the pastor knows that you did it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And then you might go to you said there was a bishop who's on the national board, right?
Yes.
He's probably
Mm-hmm.
got various things he's written. Or you could nominate him for an award. Nominate the bishop for an award. See if you can get him vetted to
Okay.
win a Nobel Peace Prize. You want people to
Mm.
notice you, nominate them for something big, right?
Okay.
Now, you
Right.
might
That
not
makes
put
sense.
that level of investment in every single relationship, but the ones that are really important to you, you might actually spend 20 minutes to a half hour here and there nominating them for awards or doing work. And when you start routinely doing this every day, they're not only going to reach out, but they'll probably start connecting you with other people too, right? Like, let's say Like some of the best people are the people who have large online reaches. So let's say you went and Googled the names of 8 bloggers who write on topics similar to this. Do you think you could find 8 bloggers, Elijah?
Yes.
You still there? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
I could. Yes.
So if you
Yes.
started sharing the content of those 8 bloggers and developing relationship with them, for example, you could even submit articles to them. Maybe one of your article might be about the bishop or the pastor in New York or the politicians. Are you getting what I'm saying? You're going to start connecting all these influential people together, connect them with other influential people, shine a light on their work. They're naturally, now I say naturally going to start helping you back, but it may happen at different levels. Like,
right.
There's an interesting thing about influence. Influence is almost like a currency. The influential people pass it back and forth between themselves, right? Now, I'm going to give you an extreme example so that you get this principle, okay?
Okay.
But let's say you wanted to build a relationship with Oprah Winfrey, okay? Who's probably right now the most influential person on this planet, or she's in the top 10 anyway, right?
Right.
If you wanted to build a relationship with Oprah Winfrey, you might spend 30 years investing in doing things that might get you on Oprah Winfrey's radar, because her influence is so great that a single endorsement from her can turn you into a multimillionaire overnight if you're ready for it. You get what I'm saying, Elijah?
Yes.
So,
yes, I do.
Now, I'm giving you that extreme example. Like, let's say you were wanting to build a relationship with a local reporter in your city that routinely spoke about political issues. You might help that reporter by sending that reporter really great story tips, great story ideas. You might do that for 2 years before the reporter was like, wow, Elijah, who is this guy? Oh my God, he's got a new book out. Let's put his book on the news because this guy's freaking awesome. Are you getting the picture I'm painting here for you, Elijah?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
When you become the kind of person who routinely sends influence to other people, now some of them might never reciprocate back because maybe they just don't get it, right? Like a pastor, for example, is influential within their own conversation, but they might not be a master at the influence game. The people who are truly masters at the influence game, you'll see they're routinely connecting and endorsing other influential people.
All right. I want to wrap up because I got other questions and we got other questions to take too. Did that
Perfect.
help you?
Sorry about that.
Did that help you, Elijah?
Yes, very much. I really appreciate that. That was very, very good.
All right. I'm keeping you on. Just watch the background noise though, okay, bud? So Sohini has a few questions, and one of them is I think is really good actually. Some influencers can see through the fact that I, referring to him as a small fish, am trying to get their attention by endorsing their work. To him, that might be a deterrent. How do you get past that?
Yeah, that's a really great suggestion, right? So this comes back to the habit of authenticity, right? If you're doing it just to get something, yes, they will see through that. If you're endorsing them and helping them because you love their work, then there becomes what Shonda Perrin would call a cycle of reciprocity between you. And you might need to give them influence multiple times before you get their notice if they're highly influential, right? But the key is you want to be playing with people you do authentically respect and admire. So if you endorse them or send them influence in some way and they don't reciprocate back, you don't feel bad about it because you've recommended someone awesome to the world. You know, I've been on 6 interviews today alone. I often do a lot of interviewing, especially now that I'm launching a book. But I am really judicious about whose shows I go on because I'm going to put David's show out to my following. I got to love and respect what David does. David, I'd come on your show any day of the week because I know you attract and awesome people and you teach principles that I really resonate with. So there becomes a give and take, a natural give and take between people when there is mutual respect and understanding. So it's really important to think about, am I truly being authentic in this relationship? If I recommend this person, do I really love and admire their work? Or am I just doing it to get something back, right? And if you're just doing it to get something back, you're absolutely right. They will see through that and it won't work.
Right. Any other questions before we move on? That was a great question, Sahini. Thank you, man. Or I hope it's a man. I don't know. Any other questions? So I want to just move on, and we'll take a few more questions in a few moments. But to be influential, you must be willing to become a leader. There's a danger, I think, here, Teresa, and we don't trust our leaders anymore. Case in point, this election coming up here in Canada on Monday. We don't want a squeaky clean leader either. But if you look at, let's say, political leaders, it's hard to trust them. Or business leaders and influencers. I see some business leaders that are just absolutely jerks. Do we need, do we need to lead on the big stage? Or personally, I prefer just to lead in my own life. If I make a difference to others, then that's just icing on the cake. What's your take?
Well, like I do agree with you. You've got to find the level that feels good to you. And at the same point, really ask yourself, am I playing big enough in my life, or am I playing small because I'm just afraid that other people might criticize me, right? And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of leaders and influential people in power that are in fact sociopaths, because it's very easy for sociopaths to step into positions of influence.
Yeah, like
and there also are a lot of really good, wonderful people in leadership positions because they've learned not to listen to their inner conversation, to sit back, stay in the comfort zone, play small, right? And here's the thing, if you always stay in your own comfort zone and never challenge yourself, you will never grow. And your ability to be of high influence to the world is diminished. And if I like to think, if I'm not scaring myself at least once a day, I'm probably not playing big enough. And being a leader is messy, because the only way to become a leader is you got to figure out what the path is. Nobody else is going to tell you how to lead. That's the definition of leadership. And so it's sloppy and messy. Hollywood has done us a disservice in past decades of having us believe that heroism is neat and tidy and everything's all cool and the superhero can just fly through the villains and everything just happens, right? And the reality is, finally in the last decade, Hollywood's been bringing more realism to what is actually life is really like, which is that leadership and being heroic in your life is messy. And sometimes you got to give yourself permission to succeed sloppily and just move forward to be of high influence in the world. And you'll start to find the more people you're of service to, the happier you are, because happiness, sustained happiness, really does come from having your life count for something.
Yeah, and it is messy. You're right. And we got to be okay with that, We got to be okay with it. We got to, you got to love yourselves through the mess, at the end of the day. So you mentioned it's a game. What's the influence game? How do we play a bigger game, play a bigger role, and still be true to our values?
Well, the only way to play the influence game is to stay true to your values. That's the only way to play it. Because, I don't call it a game because it's inauthentic. Like, a lot of people have a negative connotation with the whole word game. Like, oh, you're game playing, that's inauthentic. And no, I mean game in the sense of there's like a set of rules and etiquette to it. But one of the rules is live your passion, be true to your values, be authentic in your life.
Right. Yeah. And stay true to your message, stay true to your inner beliefs, stay, even in running a business, your business should be based on your values, what you believe in, what you see is, what's important to you. And I think if you waver off that, then you're no good to yourself, let alone anybody else that you're trying to perhaps have influence on, your customers. I want to work a little faster if we can, just for the sake of time. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how the rules of the game have changed. I mean, social media, the fragmented media choices that we now have at our disposal has totally changed the game of being an influencer. So,
Yeah.
how so, Teresa? What's happened? What do you see happening? And what do we need to do in order to perhaps shift into this sort of like mass communication explosion that's
Yeah.
happened in order to increase our results and our impact? Because there's
Well,
so
it's so
much
true. Social media
fragmentation.
is a game changer. Yeah, and it's really made it very easy for anyone to grow a following. And what I would say is, social media can become overwhelming. Pick one thing and do it well. Pick Blog Talk Radio or write a blog or LinkedIn or whatever, but pick one thing and do it well.
Okay, I like that. But it's so hard to build audience share, like you're on Blog Talk Radio, you kind of hope, are there people listening, right? Right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Sean Dupron, and for those on the call who don't know who Sean Dupron is, she's a wonderful lady. I've had her on my radio show when I had it, and she does a lot of media, PR. She's an TV award-winning TV producer, right? And
Yeah.
PR expert,
Yeah.
and also started a movement, the Forgiveness Project, which was huge a couple of years ago. And I quote her here: "A lot of us have shame around self-promotion and mistake it with its pushy cousin bragging. And there is a lot of shame. There's cultural conditioning, there's social conditioning. Talk to us about bragging and self-promotion and how, shame and cultural social conditioning might impact us."
Well, it's a key distinction in whether you're being authentic, right? If you're bragging, it's all about you. It comes from a place of bragging is like it's narcissistic and it often comes from a place of fear. Shame less self-promotion, and I mean to be able to actually talk about yourself without shame comes from a place of commitment that you're just doing it to be of service to others. You're letting other people know how you can help them. There should be no shame in that. And that's really just self-promotion to be of service.
All right. I got some wildfire, that's you. Rapid fire questions. Are you ready? I feel like you're
Yeah.
on Reach for the Top. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Do you remember
Yeah.
Reach for the Top as a kid? Okay, so rapid fire questions. Here goes. What's the recipe for becoming the most magnetic go-to person in your field?
Become a hub of the influencers in your industry. There's multiple ways you can do that. You can host a conference, start a teleseminar series, start a radio show, but become a hub. Be someone who gathers the influencers together.
Okay, cool. 3 key concepts to create massive word of mouth around your project, organization, or cause.
Similar, become a hub. Make sure it solves a really big problem for the world. B, make sure it's something you're deeply passionate about it, and then draw the influencers together who would care about that conversation.
Okay. A couple more. What are some top habits influencers have mastered to forward their reputation and brand? What do we need to be doing?
Well, we talked about a lot of those already, right? Solve a big problem for the world. Be really authentic. Make sure that the problem you solve is very specific. Those are all habits that you want to develop.
All right. And lastly, just for the sake of time, what causes a wildfire word of mouth epidemic?
Well, I already gave you the hint when I was talking to Elijah. 200 influential people talking about you all at the same time. That's what a word of mouth epidemic is.
All right. And the other question is, let's say you're out there and you're doing your thing and you experience burnout. Is there a shelf life to sort of, living a life of an influencer, having this sort of fame maybe, or how do you sustain it so you don't burn out?
True influence is based on building deep relationship, not only with your follower, but with other influential people. And deep relationships will weather anything. They really will. You could take Randy Gage is a great example of that. He's one of the top business authors in North America. He took 6 months off last year for health issues, came back, his blog is as strong as ever.
All right. And yeah, because I think you have to plan for that. You have to plan for life getting in the way a little bit. But the other thing is just, to me, I think one fear is what if you lose your relevance or your confidence a little bit, you lose that edge. That would concern me a little bit.
Yeah, that's just the self-work. That's your own journey. That's the work you got to do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Teresa. More work to do. Sohini just asked, where can we get the book? It's on Amazon, right?
It is. You can just go to massinfluencethebook.com, and you can get both the 30-day influence challenge and all your different options for picking up the book there.
All right. My last question for you is, or a couple is, who influenced you?
Oh, that's a great question. I have had so many influencers in my life. Actually, probably the one that I would most want to point to, though, is Shonda Perrin. She's actually my best friend, so I thought that's so fun that you've got one of her quotes in here. She's an amazing lady, and I think the work she does with Project Forgive has had a massive impact on my own life and me stepping into my own power.
Yeah, and for those on the call who aren't familiar with this, she featured a man who lost his family in a car accident, right? And how he came to a place of forgiveness. Most people would, and I think they were hit by a drunk driver, and the driver the driver was their neighbor, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a gut-wrenching story, actually.
Yeah, and how do you forgive? That's so hard. So shameless self-promotion time for you. What's going on?
I just get a copy of this book and read this book. It's 99 cents on Kindle. Should be free anytime. We're really
but 99 cents. Pull out that plastic. Go nuts.
But also the hard copy of the book is for sale at print cost, so you can get the paperback version of it for less than $8 if you'd rather have a physical book. And feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and you've been posting excerpts on LinkedIn. Right, okay, and you've been posting excerpts of the book on LinkedIn too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
which have been just beautiful. I've been reading them. You've been posting them, I think, pretty well every day, which is incredible. Anything else you want to, shamelessly self-promote? I'm giving you the gauntlet.
Thank you, David. It's really been a joy to be on this call with you, and a special shout out to those of you who've been asking questions. It was really fun chatting with you guys.
Yeah, and I want to thank those who asked questions. Next month we're back. We're going to be a little later in the month on the 24th. Mary Heath, a stress management consultant. We're going to talk about her book about getting your life back. So if you know anybody who's stressed, not any of us on the call, but if you do know anybody who's stressed, for sure you want to be a part of this, and definitely connect with Teresa or myself if you want. And Saskia says thanks, Teresa and David. Sohini says cool. He's gonna probably get your book. And for pennies a day, 99 cents, we can send Teresa to camp next summer by buying the Kindle version while it's still for sale. All right. So thank you so much, Teresa, for doing this tonight. And you're just such a gracious, huge woman, and I really thank you. And I want to thank everybody for being on the call. I did record this, so if you want a copy to think back on and listen to again, just let me know. All right? So in the meantime, have a great week and a wonderful month. We'll be back on the 24th. Thank you so much, everybody, and Teresa, to you as well.
Thanks, David.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
David,
please post the link.
I will. Just let me know.
Thank you, everyone.
Email me. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Fido.